All right. Welcome, everyone. I see other people continuously joining as we kick off. Welcome to the cybersecurity free webinar, very first webinar on cybersecurity from ScarStack Solution. I am your host, Olu, and we are going to have a lot of fun understanding, learning, and seeing how cybersecurity works from a defensive and offensive perspective, also from CSPM perspective, CM perspective, EDR perspective, a whole lot of perspective, including the multi-cloud, okay? Specifically in Azure, AWS, okay? Now, as we kick off over here, if you have any questions while the free webinar is going on, feel free to interrupt me while I'm talking. If you want, you can also raise your hands up. You can send a message through the Zoom chat if you're very familiar with how Zoom works, and we will get into any questions you have, okay? Now, this free webinar is meant to give people a great highlight on what cybersecurity is in the modern age. It is also meant to make you understand how it connects with what? With multi-cloud, right? Because there's a huge part of the cloud security that is now into cybersecurity. We are no longer in the on-premises stages. We are now in the cloud era. So we are going to see how all of that dots connect, okay? And we're going to dabble into a few technologies and tools and a lot of theoretical information to understand exactly what is going on over here. One other key aspect is that we're going to also look at the SSCP, the System Security Cloud Professional Cybersecurity Certification. It's that one step that is just right before the CISSP, Cybersecurity Leadership. Now, you have to know that you need to humble yourself when you're trying to get into cybersecurity. You can't come in there for the first time and say, I am a CISSP. That will mean that you are a leader in the cybersecurity field, which is hard to prove because the CCSP, which is the one that this cybersecurity that I offer targets, is there to give you the hands-on practical notion and skill set to make sure that you have the capability, the ability, and the notion to present yourself as a real cybersecurity engineer before you can actually even tell anybody you can lead other team members. So always be careful about that when you are paying attention to different cybersecurity trainings telling you this and that, okay? Those who understand exactly what that means. All right, so let's jump into the nitty-gritty of things. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. And one of the first things we are going to kick off with, all right, because I see other people joining in. Let's admit them in. That's cool. So, welcome every other person we just joined. I see like some 3 or 4 other people just joined in. So we're going to first kick off with understanding exactly what this game is all about, right? We are in here for the cybersecurity free training, and we need to first understand exactly what things look like from the certification perspective. You see, I'm in the ISC2 website, the most important cybersecurity website on planet Earth. You understand? And if I go over here to the training, I can see different types of training perspective. But if I come down here more so to the certification, I can see different certifications in here. Our target here is to understand the SSCP because that guy is the next level to the CISSP, which is the leadership and operation, which once you get done in my own IT training over here as the SSCP, you will be able to qualify for the CISSP, which is pretty much easy. So let's look at the SSCP, which is the security system security certified practitioner cybersecurity certification. Now, when I come in here, I can look and see what is going on in here, okay? And then from this perspective here, I can go down here. How can you become a cybersecurity? Let's just quickly freestyle on that one and see.
As the IT landscape continues to transform business, cyber threats continue to rise. And for companies, that means finding skilled security professionals to combat these risks. SSCP certification from ISC2 puts you at the forefront of administration and operations security for any organization. As an SSCP, you'll have the advanced technical skills and knowledge to implement critical IT infrastructure best practices and procedures, proving you have the leadership, expertise, and dedication to protect an organization's most critical assets. IT pros with advanced security knowledge are an organization's most valuable asset. Open the window to your future and a successful career in security administration and operations. Learn more at isc2.org/SSCP.
Wonderful. Let me close that. So we've just seen a brief introduction into the Systems Security Certified Protection, practitioner cybersecurity certification. Okay, and over here, this breaks down everything you need to know. SSCP quick glance. You need to at least have a 1 year experience. I want to believe every one of us has worked for at least a year, over a year. This is approved by the Department of Defense, angle of the United States. Now, these are 7 key domains. Number 1, the security concepts and practices. This basically brings you into, key cybersecurity concepts you need to be aware of and key cybersecurity practices. The access controls focus on what we call the identity and access management. This deals with basically knowing what we talk about when we talk about demilitarized zones, knowing what we talk about RBAC, role-based access control, manage identities, and all of that. And that brings us into on-premises and cloud environments, knowing how to address identity and access management within those 2 areas. From the on-premises perspective, at SCASTAC Solution, we support both Okta and Ping Identity, 2 of the most popular IAM tools out there on premises. And then from the cloud, we look at what? Microsoft Entra ID, formerly known as Azure Active Directory, as well as AWS IAM and AWS IAM Center. Okay, when we come to domain 3, this talks about risk identification, monitoring, and analysis. Everything you need to know as a cybersecurity engineer or analyst to identify risk within your company, monitor your servers, your networks, your firewalls, your solutions, your applications, and then analyzing all of the details that you figure out from all of those things. And that we deal with tools from the on-premises, looking at Splunk and what? ELK, Elastic, Logstash, and Kibana. We call it the ELK stack. From the cloud, we look at this perspective from Microsoft Defender and Microsoft Sentinel, as well as in AWS 2, AWS Guard Duty, and a few other things. And then we look at incidents response and recovery, which is more or less like a follow-up from this perspective. Okay, other key areas are cryptography, which has to do with encrypting, decrypting based on the concept of cryptography. Okay, a lot of tools there, even from AWS. You look at key management systems. From Azure, we look at Key Vault. From our on-premises, we can look at things like KeyPass as well too. Okay, when we move over from there, we look at network and communication security. Now, typically when you get to this place, it becomes tricky. Now, this part here, you have to be very comfortable and familiar with things like network settings, security systems and settings, auto-scaling, load balancing. We also look at what? IP addresses, protocols. What type of protocols are you dealing with? And what are the ports of the protocols? Some examples of some protocols are RDP, TCP, SSH, HTTP, HTTPS, DNS, so on and so forth. Okay, we now look at system and application security. Over here, we are talking about how do we defend and secure our what? Our applications and our systems across all boards in an organization over the global hemisphere. We'll look at things like Bob suits. Over here, from the cloud perspective also too, we can look at things like managing our app services, our Kubernetes services, our container services, and that can even be on premises and in the cloud. But what is the point here? Knowing how to secure those from the point of authorization on authentication to also to the level of knowing how to implement the least privileged access, talking about access control to protect those systems and applications, okay? And then we look at those also other things. If you're in the cloud, you need to know what the concept of high availability, resiliency, and redundancy is all about. Knowing how to back up your systems, understanding the concept of disaster recovery, understanding the concept of misconfiguration, knowing how to, like we said earlier on, back up and then restore your systems. Authentication authorization, very key aspect. Auto scaling and load balancing, knowing how to scale your applications so that you don't become Netflix, who back last year streamed live a boxing event between Tyson and Logan, and they had their infrastructure, which you call in the cloud infrastructure as a service, crashing out just because they lacked a lot of things. They lacked auto scaling. They didn't measure the auto scaling well. Their load balancing was not there. And so when they had their infrastructures, aka their servers, loading up, their auto scaling measure did not meet the demand of everyone. And that can happen to anybody in very honest, statement, but that was a flaw right there. And you have people checking up their internet and they couldn't even understand what was going on. Okay. So system and application security, monitoring, they go hand in hand, making sure the application is very robust and scalable, aka auto scaling, right? To meet the demands of your customers, ensuring that your application has your WAF implemented and your DDoS protection implemented so that you don't get attacked through DDoS, which is the distribution, the DDoS basically, the distribution attack, basically not giving your enemies the opportunity to attack your system or your web application so that your web application comes undone. Okay, so those are the key 7 areas right there. All right, now that we have that, I see other people are joining, so I'm just going to quickly give us a little bit of update. Now, if you have any questions as we go through this, definitely feel free to send your questions to the chat. You can also unmute your mic to ask questions. Literally, when you join this class, you're going to be unmuted automatically when you come into the class. So if you have questions, feel free to unmute your mic and ask your question. Okay, so we talked about all those things. The last one we talked about the system and application security, the distributed denial service attack. You have to be very, very careful about that. If you know one of the new AI solutions that just came in recently, I think it's DeepSeek. They are the DDoS attack, distributed denial service attack. Okay, and they, for those who paid attention, the first 1 or 2 days, you couldn't even create an account in there just because of that distributed denial of service attack. So we just want to be aware of that. Now, my IT training as Stack solution focuses on the SSCP certification for cybersecurity. Very, very solid one. What we do is we give you an introduction into cybersecurity so you don't become that entry-level cybersecurity person. We give you that SSCP, which after that, the next level will be CISSP. Technically, when I get done giving you this certification and this training, you will know exactly what's going on over here. Okay, so based off that, let's look at some other key details. Now I'm at ScarStack's website right here. Over here, I'm trying to go to our cybersecurity engineer space. So I'm gonna go ahead and select that. Perfect. And as you can see in here, it tells you about the defensive plus offensive cybersecurity. Why exactly do we have this word over here? This word is very, very important. You see, if you're going to defend something, of course, you're going to start with the defensive. All of the tools for monitoring, investigating, analyzing, reporting, all of these key skills are things that you do to monitor applications, servers, firewalls, networks, and so on and so forth within the cybersecurity field. And then you need to be offensive as well too. Who is the person threatening you, and how can you go ahead and investigate them, right? Because it's one thing to defend, it's another thing to offend, okay? And so that offensive part is you now going against those threats to understand what is going on. This can easily be you being in an elastic cloud environment, figuring out a specific threat through an agent or through an agent ID to understand who exactly is trying to break into your systems so that you can investigate and see what measures you can take going forward. Okay, so that is what that is all about. And so as we go down over here, it tells us that the SCAR-Stack SSCP cybersecurity training provides a hands-on approach to security operations, equipping participants with essential skills for our cybersecurity careers. The course begins with core concepts, which is normal, covering risk management, access controls, networking fundamentals. It then delves into what? Security operations, including what? Security monitoring that we talked about earlier. Incident response, when we talked about risk identification, monitoring, and incident response. And then cryptography and encryption, very, very important. Encrypting keys, encrypting certificates, and also encrypting secrets. Learners will explore their hands-on skills in what? Ethical hacking, identity and access management, and cloud security, which is a very, very important part of the cybersecurity in the modern age. Through all of those things, they will still be focused in understanding protocols, firewalls, networking, VPNs, our virtual private networks, right? Or VPNs, or virtual gateways, and compliance networks, right? We are all familiar with our cybersecurity compliance networks. It also prepares students for real-world cybersecurity roles and aligns with what? The ISC SSCP, right? That we've been talking about, the SSCP certification. So those are some of the things that are going on in here, okay? Now, when you go, if you're interested in this, you either enroll button, you enroll, and pretty much the IT training from SCAR-Stack solution for the cybersecurity is a 2 months IT training that starts pretty much with what? With introduction to cybersecurity. That gives you the very nitty-gritty of everything you need to know from the cybersecurity perspective. And then you look at all of those 7 domains that we just talked about over here. If I go down to this guy here, and I go a bit down, I can see those domains, right? I can even stretch my screen that way, right? You see, domain 1, security content and practices. Domain 2, access control, risk identification and monitoring, risk identification and monitoring, incident response and recovery, right there. And as the list goes, it goes on and on like that, okay? So that is what the full IT training is all about. It's very, very exciting, and it's 2 months. The first month typically will cover domain X, and then this guy's over here. And then, as we come into the second month, it will borrow from this perspective, and you get yourself concluded over here. Again, remember, it is a combination of what we call on-premises and cloud. What exactly is on-premises and cloud? On-premises used to be the IT infrastructures, IT solutions, IT platforms that we used to have with companies that could manage their own data centers. In the cloud, the companies start to migrate all of the applications to the cloud atmosphere using cloud service providers such as Google Cloud Platform, Azure, AWS, Oracle Cloud, etc. Next, if I come over here, on-premises and the cloud represent fundamental different approaches to hosting and accessing software and data. On-premises involve hosting all IT resources locally on a company's own hardware, while cloud computing relies on third-party providers such as Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, Oracle Cloud to host and manage resources that are accessed what? Remotely. an example of cloud. If I come over here, I am inside the cloud hemisphere over here. This is a Windows system. You can see it is called VM, SQL M01, and all of this fantastic thing, right? I am showing you this from a Mac system, and I'm right now inside a Windows remote server. Some of the students that are in here already who are currently in my class know exactly what I'm talking about, okay? So let's reduce that, close this one, and come back over here, and I'm going to close this, okay? Now, one other key thing I want us to focus on for the cybersecurity IT training is to understand exactly, after all your hard work, what exactly are the benefits? You understand? Now, before we get there, let's quickly look at the syllabus for the cybersecurity. We first start up with the cybersecurity foundations, right? Bringing you in to understand exactly what cybersecurity is all about, telling you what the threat landscape is all about, the key cybersecurity threats, how to handle them, and then we look at security controls, we look at the GRC, right? And then asset life management. And then we come into the nitty-gritty of things, the most important guys over here. You understand? Access control, putting together all of the things you need to do to ensure that users either on premises or in the cloud are not abusing their privileges and access. You understand? You look at the concept called least privilege access, okay? And then we look at zero trust architecture, which is very, very important as well too. The zero trust architecture, a very, very nice architectural implementation and focus in the cybersecurity and cloud security space, ensuring that you understand that you do not trust anybody in the beginning, and then as you move forward, giving them access, you only give them access based off what they need, okay? And that is what that is all about. And then we'll look at risk identification. We talked about that, cyber threat intelligence, and we look at things like the MITRE, ATT, and CK. We're going to get more understanding about that. But basically, that is your syllabus, at one stretch. We have limited time, so I'm not going to go too deep into the majority of all of these things, okay? But that is there for you. If you need the website, I'm going to post that right now in your chat so that you are aware of that, and you can also reach out to look at more detail. Now, if you need to reach out to me, I'm also going to provide my number over here too in the chat, so that if you're interested in a full cybersecurity IT training, you can always reach out to me easily. Over here, my number, and then if you need to send me an email as well, so I'm going to provide that, techinfo@carstacksolution.com. So that is it, right? So you have the website over there. It's showing, it's being presented to you right there on your screen. To reach out to me, you can get to me through 469-325-4670. Okay, and then my email is also shared to you there. All right. So apart from that, when you go down over here, you're going to see some of the key skills you're going to earn: incident response skills, application security skills, security operation skills, access control, cyber threats, threat monitoring, zero trust, endpoint detection, cryptography, CM, SOAR, and CTI. CM stands for Security Information and Event Management. These are tools such as Splunk, Microsoft Sentinel that enables your organization to monitor the cloud environment or on-premises environment of your services or your network resources, okay, such as your servers, your firewalls, and things like that. And then SOAR, that is also very, very important too as well too. And then your CTI, cyber threat intelligence, okay? SOAR is security orchestration, automation, and response, all right? So apart from all of those, let's take a look at exactly what is going on over here with how much cybersecurity engineers earn. Let's click on that. So over here, when I come in here, I can see that they earn a lot of money, right? And this, we can even search on it differently, right? You can even search for senior cybersecurity engineer or analyst, and you see exactly how much they are earning. They earn a lot, dealing with different kind of companies like Meta, which is the owner of Facebook, Sage, Fire, Bristol, and all of these cool companies, all right? So this is also a good place for you to look for new jobs, all right? And you can see a lot of them over here. Now, if I also come back here, I can open up, say, for example, dice.com. You can just simply put in cyber security. You can just put in here, I'll just say USA, and we hit search jobs. Dice is a very fantastic place to look for jobs as well, too, amongst other, areas or websites. So if I come over here and I open some of these few guys, let's open some of them over here. You can see that guy has Splunk right beside it. So let's examine some of this website. So typically over here, this one says cybersecurity analyst lead threat intelligence. As you can see that, everything, right? Threat intelligence, that's coming from what? CTI, cyber threat intelligence, which we just talked about over, I think it might even be here. See cyber threat intelligence, CTI, and if you look at it closely, you see that there, cyber threat intelligence. So let's listen to that. So over here, we're looking at so many things in here. So let's see what kind of information these guys have here. So there's a whole lot of talk over here. Let's look at it. Analyzing potential attacks, compromise data, systems, and interests. Perfect. Orchestrating, communicating with parties. Okay. The ideal candidate role will be a cybersecurity professional with track record of excellence in threat intelligence, reporting, right? Research and reporting. We talked about risk identification, monitoring, analysis, right? Reporting, seeing key things such as being over here, right? This is an elastic environment over here, an ELK environment over here. This is a Splunk environment over here also too. Monitoring and even having the capability to do what? To create reports as well too. So, you can come over here, you can say savers, you can create reports, you can create alerts over here. This is a Splunk environment. This has what we call an SPL search query that is currently searching using what we call index patterns or indexes, which are very, very, very key. Your index has different ways of looking at different types of data, from internal data to audit data, application data, web data. These are the kind of queries you run to do what? To investigate, research, and see different systems, applications, and networks that are in threat or under threat, and knowing how to monitor, resolve, and report those items. If I take all of that out and I come in here, I can see basically that from my indexer, I have the opportunity to see a few things going on over there. If I say equal to, I get more details. I can look at different kind of levels. Audit levels, this level right here, this one over here, internal audit, so many things. I can even bring in other things like web, application, and network to figure out what indexer do I want, because the indexer stands for the root that figures out exactly what you are trying to monitor and investigate from a cybersecurity perspective. Over here, we call it in Splunk, we call it mostly what? Indexes. In ELK, which is Elastic Loss Tracker and Kubernetes, it's the same concept too. They are all indexes, but we call them what? Index patterns. Okay? Throw that in back. And I can figure out the time I want. Say, look at that from the last 30 days and search on that. And it brings out data. And from this perspective over here, a lot of things are going on. I can change this SPL query, which is Splunk query or SPL search query, to be even more complex, such that it transforms the nature of this table to turn it into a statistical data table information. But in here as well too, as I'm looking at the fields, I can see very interesting fields that break down the minute details of everything you're looking at over here. The major fields are listed here. I can even add more fields if I want. Right now, as I'm looking at this information, if I break this down here, I can see some few details about this. I can see that the host right here that is being presented is from this area here, which is the Splunk cloud. Those are some of the key details as it breaks it down. Okay, and then also here from the elastic perspective as well too, I'm looking at a key breakdown of information from my what I call a data view. As you can see, I can switch from a few data views right here. This one here carries the most events. It is tied into what we call an index pattern. One, which is created under the management field here. When I select stack management, you create an index management right there. This index management here will create an index pattern for you that you can now use to create what we call a data view back in your Discover page. When you pick up that data view, you will now start looking at the information from various data sources. Now, what do we mean by various data sources? It means when you are talking about risk identification, monitoring, and analyzing the risk that you are seeing, you need to monitor services or resources such as virtual machines, computer servers, networks, firewalls, web applications, and so on and so forth. It's a long list. And so what now happens is that when you have that view, you can now start viewing them and you can start using what we call KQL, Custom Query Language, to do what? To filter what type of cybersecurity threats you are looking for. And we'll get the chance to see some of those things. So from a general or high level perspective, you put in those kind of queries in here, you search for them, and then based on the servers, systems, networks, firewalls, and applications, etc. that you're monitoring, you start to get different kind of reports. Over here, if I want to see how many agents I'm monitoring, if I click on that, I can see that I'm currently monitoring about 4 systems. We're going to come back to this, okay? Now, let's reverse ourselves back to where we were. Over here, it talks about some of those roles, and I just gave you, I just took you through a very quick, storyline so that you understand what's going on from the back end. Okay, but in here, you can see that the description is not even that complex. You understand? As you can keep going down here, this is probably for a lead. So, they're not saying too much. They're just saying, hey, man, just know those things. We talked about firewall, network traffic. Right? We talked about that. All of these things you would need to have already been established as a cybersecurity engineer. Understanding how to use things like Wireshark, Nessus, Nmap, Bob Suit. You understand? Kali Linux. And so you have to have that background and understanding. So as it goes down, this one is a lot of story. You understand? So we're just going to go and click X on that one. Okay. Cybersecurity. Let's see what this guy is all about. That is a small amount. Okay. Maybe not too bad. You understand? There, yeah, and there. Okay. Contracting, that's public contracting position. So over here, let's see if they mention any key skills. Right? This one is also a very soft position too. Nothing happening over here. I don't see them mentioning any key tool. You understand? They're just saying over here, project management intermediate, Microsoft Excel, data analysis, network engineer. Nothing special over here. Excellent. Okay? So let's look at this next one over here, see if they have anything that makes sense. That is even terrible as well. So when you're searching, you have to just search for, real serious stuff, right? This one looks like they know what they're talking about. The TSSCI, that's a cybersecurity, or, that's a clearance right there. You understand? That you need. So you see these ones, they are making a little bit of sense, right? Talking about CM, talking about SOAR, talking about firewalls, routers, switches, ID. You understand? This one is a job that makes more sense. Like, you can see they have it Splunk written over there. And this one is paying 148,000 to 158,000 right there. So these guys, one of their key skills they want is CM. And then Splunk is actually a CM, right? Splunk is what we are looking at over here right now. You understand? The ability to know how to use Splunk, and then knowing how to filter your data, understand the data that is coming out, looking at the host, and then a few things, also knowing how to create reports, knowing how to use your dashboard. If I went into this dashboard right now, give it a second, I can look for some key specific dashboards here that have been created in the past. Let's take a look at it and see. right? So you can see different dashboards I've created of reports in Splunk to kind of get access to different things in there. This one here, user activity monitoring audit dashboard by Stack, searching actions by users. This one says visualizes which users are running the most searches. It is useful for detecting abnormal usage patterns or heavy use. This right here gives me the kind of different users who are logging in. You can see that is me right there. Do you understand? Then I have this other users that are logging in, and I can see the rate of their logging in right there. Okay, that is how that works. And then I can see different other information over here, such as the split log actions into categories like who logged in, logged out, the search, edit user. This shows me visual security telemetry for spotting changes or unauthorized actions. Okay, so it shows me all the different kind of things. Amongst all of this, the powerful one is the most login attempt, and then searches, and then other things such as getting passwords or resetting passwords, and so on and so forth. Access by apps, right? This one right here, this visualization is telling me about monitoring how frequently users access different Splunk apps, such as alert and so on. So, right? So these are different levels of that, and it's reporting all of that information to me. So we have so many examples over here, okay? So those are what visualizations looks like within the Splunk environment. Now, remember, if you have questions, definitely feel free to ask. I see someone might have a question there. Yeah, so I see, yes, I see Unduka, yeah, mentioned, I probably guess when I was mentioning Wireshark and Map, Nessus, Bob suits, and so Unduka was saying, yes, I use these tools at work. So that's very, very good, Unduka, right there. Okay. Probably also probably you're also using Splunk. Now, one very key thing to know is that Splunk and ELK, they've come a very long way. They used to be a very complex app, like, most people might not even know when you go to work, they just give you those environments, they just give you your login, you're good. But technically, implementing and installing them physically, used to be very, very tough, especially, I just remember trying to have students download those, and, a lot of people run through a lot of problems just because it's quite technical. But now everybody's recognizing the cloud. Everybody's moved to the cloud. You understand? And so everybody has that advantage. So now, right now, even all my students, I think I have about 9 or thereabout of them, at this current period. We are loading up on May, and this was very important. On May 20, we're starting another new cybersecurity class. And so right now, I have about nine, I think nine or eight cybersecurity students, and then we have a few new ones starting up a new class on May 20th. So if you're interested in that, definitely reach out to me, to join this big game here, make a lot of money, enjoy yourself, learning of this new technology. Cybersecurity is very, very, very cool. So we have that going on, okay? And so that is all about the Splunk and ELK. They're very, very important. And then, of course, we also have things like our Microsoft Azure environment, where we use the Entra ID for what? For identity and access management, okay? And then that enables you to do what? Use role-based access control to control access for users. Over here, if I click and open up configuration, I'll see different users, and I'll be able to see the kind of identity role access they possess. If I look at this person here, I'm agreeing. I can look at her assigned roles. Let's see if she even has anyone. Okay, she has one general assigned roles. She now also has what we call the RBAC assigned roles. You see that? She has a lot of powerful roles right there. Well, maybe not all of them. We have some of them are reader roles. The reader roles basically means she can just read details in a cloud environment for those resources. This ones here means you can do a little bit of more sophisticated stuff. Virtual machine administrator login. This means she can log in as a virtual machine administrator into this computer, or she can just log in as a normal contributor without the administrator privileges. Okay, a lot of sophisticated resources she has. Now, let's take a look at one thing very careful. Now, she's looking at this, and a resource is something we call a resource group. A resource group is a container, just like a computer folder, right, for your application. And then the resources can now be put into it. Your resources are kind of like your databases, your AWS EC2 instances, any cloud resource, such as a file being put into any folder, is the definition of a resource group. It's what it categorizes and what arranges resources accordingly within the cloud hemisphere. It's no different than you seeing things here like Okta here, and you're looking at it and have files organized inside Okta. If I come back to the maze right here, you can just see all of these things. If all of these things were exposed right now, and it's just I put out all the files here, I wouldn't be able to even do anything, right? Just one guy over here has a lot of maze here. I go into architectures, I see stuff in there. I come back here, I go into on demand, I see different mazes. You understand? You go, you keep going on and on. And so the resource group is meant to be like this guy over here that organizes all of your folders into files very, very smooth. As you can see, that's the folder for the Azure Cloud, AWS Cloud, mean stack for those developers that know what's going on, Scrum Master, data analytics, so on and so forth. Okay, so that is what is really going on over there. Now, we also have that in our AWS environment. Let me look for it. Yeah, that's our AWS right there, right? Even in the AWS, looking at things from access control, right? We see our IAM Identity Center. That's our Identity and Access Management Center right there. Shows you a set of users that you want to control, users that you give privilege to and stuff like that. You can see as one user right there. If I go back to the menu option over here, I can pull myself back into just the basic IAM. Look at that. Go to the users. A few users right there, not that much. You understand? Even my students probably have more users than me. You understand? Because I teach them, I tell them how to create users, how to give them roles, right? So if and assign them to user groups, then those user groups will have what we call role permissions as well too, right? As you can see that there are some few user groups over here. If I look at this guy right here, it tells me that this group here that has some certain permissions has 2 users. This is a cybersecurity engineers Dallas group. If I go there, Frank Lucas is in there, John Doe is in there. Let's look at the permissions they have. These guys have this specific permission. These permissions would give these users the ability to know what they can do once they log into their own AWS environment. Because the power of IAM means that whenever I give a user his credentials, after creating him and giving him his credentials, username and password, the user will be able to do what? Logging into an AWS environment, but with restricted permissions. They would lack some permissions to prevent and restrict them from doing certain things. In this scenario over here, these 2 users are being put into a group. And as far as we are concerned, these are the permissions they have generally. Amazon EC2 full access will give them the permission to create a new EC2 instance. So when they log in, they'll not be able to do some things, but from this perspective, they will come into this EC2 and they'll be able to do what? They'll be able to create a EC2 instance. Okay, and so that is what we mean by access control and identity and access management, controlling what people can do within an environment. Okay, that is what's up. If you have any questions again, definitely let me know. Okay, we're going to switch this back to the home page. Take this one back to the home page. Now, one key thing I want to do before we round up, right? Because we're looking at some key job examples over here, and I think we're probably almost wrapping up with those ones, right? We're looking at that Splunk right there that talked about CM, right? CM architectures. Again, let's look at some CMs. Microsoft Sentinel. Let me move this away. Microsoft Sentinel. That is a CM2, right? Microsoft Sentinel is a very, very popular and great CM2. You can see that I have one Microsoft Sentinel implemented right there. Look, all of these things, they're all details for students who come into a full IT training. I've come over here to Stack Solution. I come into cloud security materials. Look at that. That should be under security over here, and then Microsoft Sentinel PDF. You see a very robust documentation. I think this documentation is 20 pages. You understand? Talks about everything from cyber threat intelligence to all of these things. You know, if you take it back up to the top, Microsoft and the practical overview. Even from here, if I give you a practical lab assignment, by the time you get done with it, when you wake up the next day, you will know what's going on. You know, you see everything. You understand? I can show you everything from our incidents, right? Right there. Open configuration. That's your incident right there. Knowing and understanding how to create incident. Understanding the MITRE, ATT, and CK for threat intelligence. Everything is put in here and we go through that in class. You see all of the diagrams, you see how you create everything. You have an understanding of exactly what you're doing from a cybersecurity or cloud security perspective. Everything is well detailed. Going for threat hunting. Microsoft Threat Hunting refers to threat hunting featuring within Sentinel, a cloud-based security and information security information and event management platform. You understand? Which also represents itself as security, orchestration, automation, and response. Okay, all of these things, they are all typed in. Okay, you can see it goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. As I'm talking to you, I probably have about 7 students in even in cloud security over here. About 7 or 8, I think 8 in cybersecurity, 7 in cloud security, 4 or 5 currently in cloud administration in Azure, about 6 in AWS. You understand? On and on, data analyst, all of these things. So all of these things are documented to make the students understand exactly what they're doing. When they start creating things like bookmarks within a Microsoft Sentinel, they understand what is going on. They get later on as you go down here, you get into the MITRE attack, right? Threat intelligence, you start creating things for your MITRE attack. As you go down and on, that's the MITRE, ATT, and CK. Let's see what that is all about. Very, very interesting concept, advisory tactics, right? You go down there, you see all the options, all of the configuration. Let's check that out very fast. Probably want to have Google AI shows that rather than others random website. Perfect. The MITRE, ATT, and CK, right? I just like to call it MITRE attack. It's just very simple to say it that way. It's a widely used knowledge base and framework for understanding and categorizing cyber attack. It provides a structured way to represent how attackers operate from initial access to exploration, allowing security professionals to do what? To better identify, prevent, and what? Respond to what? Cyber threats. I mean, come on. That's very easy to understand. You understand? So we use that technology to implement all of those things, right? Ensuring that we know how to categorize our cyber threats, putting them in, and then categorizing the kind of cyber attack that we are facing, okay? And so that is what those are about, right? And we also have our what? Our Microsoft Defender as well too. Comes in there. Let's expand our bad guy. See it? Shows you everything you need to know. Okay, and this is used more as an endpoint detection and response. That's what the Microsoft Defender is used for. Okay, now one other key thing I wanted to mention over here as well too. If we look at this guy here, the Splunk, and say for example the ELK over here. If I look at this ELK here, it's looking at 4 agents, right? So basically, these systems here that are used for risk identification, monitoring, and analysis, they are meant to do what? They are meant to monitor, analyze, report, and investigate, as well as take proactive actions on server systems and so on and so forth that they're looking at. If I look at it from this perspective over here, I'm looking at 4 servers that I'm currently monitoring. If I take that guy that way, I can see those servers. If I go back to my Azure portal environment, I'm going to pull out that Azure environment right here. And I'm going to move it this way. From this perspective over here, I can go in and I can go to my own page. I can go to, for example, my virtual machines, probably just go through to the normal route. I'll go to more services. I'll click on compute. I'll look for my virtual machines. And I can see 4 virtual machines listed over here, right? expand that a bit. Now let's come back here to observe something. So you can see that basically this elastic environment here is monitoring for servers, and those servers are the servers that are listed over here. I've got the VM1 Pelamai MK, that's the VM1 Pelamai MK right there. I've got the VM Central Nubian, that is it right there, the VM Central Nubian right there. The VM SQL M01, I have that VM SQL M01. Better yet, I'm even currently logged into that server right now, VM SQL M01, okay? And I'm right there, I'm using what we call Nessus, which is another tool for networking management for cybersecurity engineers. Okay, so that's what's going on over there. And so you have the capability to use your what? Your cybersecurity skills and experience to know how to connect to other networks, servers, firewalls, applications, etc. to monitor them. Okay, from this perspective right here, if I come over here, I can go ahead to do what? To select the agent names, which I looked at earlier on, and I can narrow my look at one of them. I can click that guy right there, filters it out right there so that I can see all of the details, regarding it. All right, so that's how that works. But ELK, very, very powerful. The combination of Elastic, Logstash, and Kibana. Elastic itself being the particular resource that goes out to travel, create agents, whether you're using this through an integration. An integration is integrating a cloud environment, such as going over here and integrating a specific cloud environment, such as using your ad integration and then connecting through a cloud service or a database or whatever you want, And so in this perspective, it sends what? It sends an agent using the Elastic, right? The Logstash is the server side that enables that capability for Elastic to travel. And then when Elastic collects whatever data it wants through the concept of Logstash, it arrives and brings it back to what? To Kibana. And the Kibana environment is what we're looking at. Hence, I can go to this home page, all right? And over here, from this perspective, we're still in the Kibana any which way. But if I click deployment as an example, I say manage this deployment. Because we're in a cloud space in Elastic, right? It's going to first log me out because it's going to observe some security measures. I'm going to click that guy. Click this one here. And then I'm back in. When I'm back in here, some key information in here, I can then do what? I can say open Kibana. If I want to see my fleet, I can click open there. I can see a few things. Right now, my Vulkan arrow is on LT. Let's see what it's saying. Yeah. Later on, it sets itself back to LT, right? Because I have measures in there within my VMs in Azure to make sure that everything is looking good. All right. These are the list of things. You can see all of those virtual machines. You can see the LT state and you can see their agents using Elastic to go and fetch data. All right. Same thing. I can go back to my Discover. I can go back to the dashboard. I can go back to other things like this. Now, let's look at management. Under management here, I also have access to my integrations as well too. I can access those same things easily here. Under management, I have what we call stack management. Over here, we can create things like users roles for our ELK environment. If I start to tell you this, you probably wouldn't even understand until you're actually in a full IT training. You understand? But over here, users, I use what we call WinLog bit. This one, I am monitoring a computer server, the VM SQL M1. Azure virtual machine. I'm monitoring it. And for me to create this in the ELK environment, I'm using something very important we call the WinLog bit. Let's take a look at that one as well too. Let's ask it, what is the role of WinLog bit? Enter. You understand? WinLog bit reads from one or more event log using Windows APIs filters the event based on user configuration, then sends the event data to the configured output, Elasticsearch or Logstash. WinLogBit watches the event log so that the new event data is sent in a timely, you understand, manner. So it's giving you the details of what WinLogBit does. Very, very, very complex implementation to perform, especially if you're not really even in IT. You understand? But we make all of those knowledge very easy and understandable. Okay. And so in this perspective, out of the 4 different VM servers I'm monitoring in my Azure environment, one of them is being implemented through what we call WinLogBit. And part of that process to make all of that happen is to create a specific user in ELK here to make all of that action come together. We also have something that we call the index management as well too, where you can create specialized indexes that can generate results. That itself leading towards something else we call developer tools. You can see here I'm loading up a whole lot of data. I can play those data. They return different types of data. This data has been created to falsify different kind of information for different users, returning a status failure of 2.0 update failure, update of or post rather of 2.0.1. You understand? Or different kind of information, and then I can now come back to my discover page to create a data view for that special guy right there. And I think if by my correction or by my target, that is under security logs. You understand? I take that guy, switch the date from last minute. Let me move some of those my Zoom connections in there. I can say, let's say 15 weeks ago, update that. Still not bringing out any data. Let's look at that again. Let's change the calendar details. I'll say last 30 days. And that's okay. It's not bringing out any data right now for security logs. That's okay. We can look at other ones like the metrics. That brings out a lot of data for us. Looking at this one, in this case, this guy is looking at VM-SQL 01, but that's also filtered over here as well too. I can take that out. Look at how many agents it is monitoring. Okay, it's monitoring the 4 agents. I can monitor that to Vulkan Hero VM. Shows me all of the details of the Vulkan Hero. I can look at all of the fields and narrow down to that, right? See exactly what is going on within those guys, the timestamp and kind of information. So the same goes in also too for our Splunk. Don't forget, if I come back to the search right here, right? And I can put in any kind of index pattern and find the details. I can go to my reports to go and see other reports I've generated. Perfect. I can see all of the results. Now, one last thing I want us to do before we round up over here is to see how we can create what we call a network security group. Okay, network security, right, pretty much fun stuff. You can see exactly how you can create a network security group in Azure to control traffic, incoming into any resource or incoming outgoing into any resource. Okay, just give me a quick second here. Let me see how I can manage this my screen. I think I stopped sharing. Share back. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to do one thing right here. I'm going to go to Azure because I really, really love Azure. You understand? Very, very powerful tool. Let me close some of these things we don't need. Okay, perfect. Let me see. I think is this okay. I think I probably even closed the show. So let's open it up again. No worries. Perfect. I'm going to sign in over here. So let's look at something. We want to understand exactly what is really going on with networking, protocols, ports, network security groups, or as we call it in AWS, security groups. How do I understand the concept of inbound and outbound networks? Let's look at that. I'm going to go to more services over here. I'm going to go to networking. And I can see a lot of powerful things here. I can tell you a lot of these guys here, they are very dangerous. We've got the virtual networks, public IP addresses, Azure bastions, DNS zones, private links, route tables, network interfaces, public IP prefixes, NAT gateways, peerings that peers one virtual network to another, DDoS, distributed denial of service attack, the protection plan, WAF, web application firewall policies. You see, all of these things, they're still there. Even in AWS, they're there. You understand? You go to the menu, you start eating your networking and content delivery. You click on VPCs. You start to see all of those cool stuff. List of your VPCs, your subnets, route tables, internet gateways. You see that VPC? In Azure, it is called what? A virtual network. You create a virtual network right here. At some point, it's going to ask you for what? For a subnet. See, you go to IP addresses, use subnet. A virtual network needs a subnet. It's the same thing. It all happens. You understand? Those environments, they're all there in this cloud spaces, okay? So one thing I wanted to just show us very fast over here is how to create a network security group. Now, over here, I'm under network, and we've talked about some of those fantastic things. You have your firewall manager, your firewall, all of that, your load balancers, both your general load balancer for TCP and your load balancers for HTTPS, which would be the application gateways. Okay, fantastic stuff. Of course, I know it's very complex if you've not seen this before, but that is just what it is. When you come into a full IT training, you get a very full knowledge and understanding of exactly what we're talking about. Let's launch network security group over there. I'm going to create one. As you can see, there are a few network security groups here. Network security group is technically very easy to create. It's what you do with it after it's been created that matters the most. Okay, I see some information in the chat right there. So Untuka says, can you touch on the difference between regular IT networks and networks in OTICS? I do not know what you mean by OTICS environment. So if you want to unmute your mic, Untuka, and ask that directly, that would make more sense.
Yeah, so my question, if you can hear me, is what's the difference between a regular IT network and OT ICS environment, meaning operational technology, industrial control system, or
I don't know what an IT control ICS environment is. Are you talking about the difference between networking from an on-premise or cloud, or is ICS some other?
no, like a critical security, like energy, power plant, wastewater.
I think they all will, again, it depends on what you understand by networking, right? Networking in the real sense is pretty much network infrastructures that you use, regardless of if it's even on-premise or in the cloud, right? It is what networks your resources, whether they're on-premise, right? For example, if I want to network one virtual network to another, or one VPC to another, or I want to network from a virtual gateway or VPN gateway using on-premises into the cloud, right? Networking always means one thing: transfer of traffic from one sector or one side, right, of a computer system to another. You understand? So the OTC ISIS, honestly, that can mean one specific department or what we call industry, right? Just using a specific name over there. Does that make sense? So basically, networking has to do with connecting firewalls, protocols, and understanding their port numbers, okay? Whether you're looking at it from the perspective of protocols, you're looking at it from SFTP, right? Secure File Transfer Protocol. Tech is tech, then any other thing can be any other thing, okay? Does that make sense? Perfect, okay, hopefully that helped you, okay? So now, resource group. I'm going to come over here and create a new resource group. I'm going to call this resource group RG. I'm going to say this is for the central US. I'm going to say this is for a project called, let's say, regular. And then this is for production environment, okay? I'm going to click OK on that one. Now I'm going to give this network group a name. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to call this NSG because that's what we call network security groups in Azure, NSG. That's the abbreviation for it, okay? This is going to be the first network security group, and I need more network security groups. I'll say NSG1. I'm going to put this in a region. A region in the cloud is called an availability zone. An availability zone means where do you have all your resources across the world? Let me quickly show you one thing here. Let's wait for that to load up. Because I do not want to interrupt the other page I'm working with. I'm going to type in something called service X. This guy here shows me all of the areas Azure has its zones. You see that? We have one in Nigeria, two in South Africa. Those are availability zones. They are regions where Azure has data centers, right? So an availability zone has to do with a region. The region now has what we call zones. That is a region. In that region, it can have zones. The zones means different areas. Like if a zone is Texas, then it will not have different data centers in that zone, such as in Dallas, in Austin, and maybe in Houston, right? So availability zones. It breaks down itself from what? From regions. Hold on for that. Regions to zones. And the zones to data centers. What is going on is a region has one or more availability zones. That brings us to that zone. The zones have one or more data centers. That brings us to data center. You understand? Houses, computer, servers. All of the action happens in the data center. The networking, if you see it, is very ugly in real life. You understand? You come over here and you say data centers. Go to images. You understand? At times that, we are showing you one introduction, right? One went into the SSCP, right? All those wire in the back, this is what is going on. Everything you're using in the cloud, they are all in data center. They are human beings that are there that are monitoring those things, all right? That is all of them, okay? Does anyone have any questions? Okay, let me see. I think there might be a new question. Oh, yeah. So, okay, I see Unduka says, okay, I understand. Thanks for breaking it down. That's no problem at all. Okay, Unduka, you're welcome. And so that's what's going on. Now, Azure has more availability zones and regions for your data centers than AWS. I don't even think AWS even has up to half of this. I think Azure is like 3 times the amount. If I try to maybe quickly look for that, if you can spare me the patience, go to AWS Cloud. Yeah, go to our learning guide, look for one of our stuff right there, and wait for this guy. And I still need to come back to this guy. I want to show you something in here, but for now, let's reduce it. So AWS, how do we look for that one? Availability zones. Perfect. Let's analyze that one. That is AWS, right? So you can see the difference in the numbers, okay? Ironically, they actually have a lot of stuff going on here in Russia, you understand? But that is that anyway. But you can see in US, it's just mainly within the West region and the East region. And in Africa, there's nothing going on there. Or the down one here, over here, you understand? So that is how these guys work. Azure beats AWS, by far in terms of their availability zones and where they actually have what? Where they actually have resources, okay? So that's what's going on over there. Now that we understand that, let's jump back in here to our creation of this, let's see where that was, of this network security group. So I'm creating this network security group right here. I've put in the central US, and then I want to go to something we call tags, which is not really relevant for this class here. It's just a metadata for understanding what resource you're creating, who owns it, what team, and what environment is for. So we're going to skip that. I'm going to come over here to create this network security. It's very easy to create. It's, like I said, it's the action that happens after it's been created that matters the most. Now that that's been created, I'm going to go into that resource. And now that I'm inside the resource, I'm going to do what we call open configuration. This is just meaning opening all of the settings in here. Because back in the days, they used to be exposed, but Azure just went ahead and just started locking them up so that you have to click on that and then it opens all of them, right? And the network security group has what we call an inbound and outbound security group. Because again, I'm going to come back there. I know how to move very dynamically, architecturally speaking, right? I'm going to come into this Azure cloud here. I'm going to go into architectures. There's something else we call an application security group. Very, very important. Let's look at the diagram of that. That application security group is a beast. For those of you, because I know a few of you here in this webinar right now and my actual full cybersecurity IT training, we are going to come over here and you're going to understand the importance of an application security group. You understand? But for now, that is a diagram showing you exactly what is happening. You create a virtual network, which is a security group, right? Very, very important, especially in the cloud space. Then you create an application security group, and then you do all of these fantastic things. And then what will now happen is your computer servers in the cloud become more secured, and then they can securely communicate with each other. You can even jump from one computer server into another as if it's a kindergarten joke. You understand? That is what is going on when you get to the end of those guys and implement them, okay? There's a quick brief information in there, all right? Let's jump back to reality. So back here, I'm inside my inbound and my outbound security rules. I can add an inbound security rule because right now, there are two things going on over here. If I want to do that, I can click the add button. But now, we would just neglect some of all the settings here because that's for an advanced true IT class. But if I wanted to enable this virtual machine to have what we call an inbound traffic to log in remotely into that virtual machine. It depends on what kind of virtual machine it is or what kind of computer server. Is this a Linux computer server or is this a Windows? Is this even a Mac? I come into the service here. I can see some of those things. If this was a Linux computer system, then I'll say SSH because that is the protocol and port for a Linux computer. It uses a service or protocol called SSH, and the port number assigned for it is 22. If it was a Windows, I will want to select RDP, which has the port number 3389. If my point or my ball of contention was HTTP, I select that one, port 80. HTTPS 443. You understand? It goes on and on and on like that. FTP, all of these are services, but technically they are protocols. Okay, in this case, let's just assume this is for an SSH. So I put SSH there. That means it's a Linux computer. I can now say deny. The moment I say deny, if any computer server I plug this network security group to, you will not be able to log in there using SSH because I've just put a network security group traffic security on that says deny that. For now, we will allow. If you want, you can change it. Okay? Click add. It adds it. Allow SSH, port number, protocol, TCP, and so on and so forth. Okay? Now, I want to add an outbound. This outbound, I want to prevent this Linux computer from having internet access going out. Network security group will give me that. I'll go over here, I'll say custom, I will say my ball of contention is HTTP. S. I'm going to still even add HTTP so that I can defeat them from both ends. 9. HTTPS outbound. Then I go and I say deny that. See that? Action deny. Let's add another one. Quickly change the name here. Make sure you are focusing. HTTP. Outbound. Select the service. HTTP. Deny. Add. You see that? This network security group is now loaded with this kind of stuff. Now, I can plug in a virtual network to this network security group by going to the subnet. Associate this network security group with the virtual network, because we talked about the virtual network and we said they enable resources in the cloud to communicate with each other, either over the internet, within a network, or even from the cloud to on-premises. I can choose Vulkan Heroes virtual network. Let me see how many. I have a lot across different ones. Let me see who will be the scapegoat over here. Let me use Vulkan Hero. Okay, I'll select the subnet as well. So it has a subnet called that guy. If I come here, just so that you know what Vulkan Hero is going on over there. Let's come back here and reduce this a bit. This is the Vulkan Hero virtual machine. Reduce that a bit. That is too big. Reduce that text a bit. That's the Vulkan Hero right there. Using a virtual network that is right there with a subnet of default. All right. So I know what's going on here. So I'm going to go here and say, yes, select this network security group. So this network security group now has a virtual network. You see, the irony of this is when I now go back to this place here and I want to create a new virtual machine, and I go to more services and I click on compute to create a new virtual machine. Where is it? That guy. You know, technically not going to create, but I'll just show you exactly what is going on. And for the students who are here in the full cybersecurity, I really hope you're paying attention, because you're going to meet this implementation very soon, you know, in a more robust way. But this one is just know you're going to meet this, okay? So I'm going to first select the virtual machine resource group, because like we talked about resource group, you always have to put these resources in resource group. You can't escape that. That is why that guy is showing you that. Okay, so let me try to look for a resource group that has maybe Vulkan Hero or something like that. Okay, I see that resource group there. So I've selected the resource. It's pretty much a folder to put in your resources. Okay, I'm going to call this guy VM1. Put this in this HR department for Vulkan Hero. Right, and then PRD, just in case for production. Oh, so I probably have one that has that name. Just switch it up that way. You understand? Second virtual machine. That's the cool part about naming these things very good, professionally. That's how we do it professionally in companies. I'll go down here. I'll select this one. I'll select the image as an Ubuntu. That is a Linux virtual machine. I'll give it the size of 4 gig. That is perfect. You see, all of these things does not even really matter. Where I'm trying to take you to is the networking. You see, when I arrive here, right, I have this virtual network, remember? That's that guy there, right? Subnet. We connected that subnet right there, right? That had the Vulkan Hero. Again, if I try to do the associate, you see, that's the same guy. So whenever I'm selecting it from this perspective over here, when I select this virtual network, what is basically happening is this virtual machine is accepting this virtual network, because I have a lot of them, right? But this specific one, the Vulkan Hero virtual network, is tied to this network security group that has this root. So by the time I go ahead and create sorry, where's that at again? By the time I go ahead and create this virtual machine to tie it or associate it with this virtual network already is associated to a network security group that has some very serious inbound and outbound traffic routes. And then I just go ahead and I just create it. When this virtual machine is created, and we go back to an example of a virtual machine, go back to one of them, like this guy here, and we go open configuration over here, reduce this guy, go to the network settings. It will do what? It will have those configuration of those network security group. Again, this one is not the one we created, right? But this one just has this one right now. You understand? It will have the concept of what? This network security group, okay? So we'll round up here for today. There's a lot of other cool stuff, you know, again, time is never really on our hands. But if you have any questions, kindly let me know if you have any last minute questions before we round up this class for today, which is a free webinar, by the way. Any questions? Is everyone good? The questions? Okay, so I think that's perfect. Now, thanks everyone for joining again. Remember, if you want to join a full cybersecurity class, you know, definitely reach out again. We do have, you know, this cybersecurity class covers main domains here that aligns with our CCSP you know, certification. You can see all of the technologies, all of the tools we get to learn. You know, we're going to host another one where we'll give you a little bit of introduction to cybersecurity, let you know of the fun stuff that is going on there. That is the Domain X, talks about all of these fantastic items. And we'll talk about phishing. We talk about, you know, samples of phishing. You know, some of you, the guys that are in the full IT training on cybersecurity already, you know, you've seen all of these things, samples of ransomware, very, very, very cool and fantastic class where we walk through this documentation, look at all of the cyber threats, SQL injection, we look at man-in-the-middle attack, we look at some of those things, you know, such as our multi-factor authentication. These are cool technologies right here, essential cybersecurity technologies used to combat cyber threat. We look at all of those things right there. The document is fully alive. You understand? Talk about the threat landscape there, the different ways, right, that people can use to attack cybersecurity. And we go on and on and on, talking about malware analysis, cybersecurity certifications. You look at the CISSP, CISM, and then the CCSP. That is our guy there, the most powerful guy right there to take you to what? That elevation of management. Okay, that's why you see that the CIF programmatically put that for the students here so they understand the chain of command right there. Okay, like that. You see compare there, number one. You know, so that is exactly what is going on. You have your cybersecurity resources right there. We go into Azure security, best practice for Azure security, AWS security, governance, risk and compliance. We get into everything, penetration testing, you know, the whys and hows. You understand? Pen testing, ethical. Man, it's a lot, man. A lot of cool information. Okay. So round up over here is 10 p.m. We'll round up officially. Thank you all for joining. And, you know, hope to see you guys in further future free webinars. Okay. Thank you very much.